The following is a hockey podcast out of Vancouver and Surrey, British Columbia. It'll only consist of a lot of puck talk and even more BS, or in actual words, banter and satire. Enjoy, and as always, go Canucks go.
Now that the Canucks season is officially done, people are thinking, is Rick Tocchet going to leave Vancouver? And I'm telling you, there's a big reason why Rick Tocchet is going to stay on Vancouver. That's coming up next here on Locked On Canucks.
You're Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Locked On Canucks. My name is Trevor Beggs, co-host of Locked On Canucks and also Canucks writer currently with Daily Hive, baby. Before we dive into the show, we got to thank you for tuning into Locked On Canucks because it is your Canucks every damn day, and we got you. Whether the Canucks are winning the Pacific Division or whether they are missing the postseason, which we know is now a 100% probability for your Vancouver Canucks. But what we don't know is whether or not Rick Tocchet is going to stay with the Vancouver Canucks. But I'm telling you right now, it's a non-story because Rick Tocchet is going to stay with the Vancouver Canucks, and there are two main reasons. One is because of Captain Quinn Hughes, and the other is looking at the other potential coaching vacancies around the NHL. So that's what I want to touch on to kick off the show. We'll also get into Quinn Hughes opening up about what I called one of the most disappointing seasons over the past 12 years. Again, a couple episodes ago, I looked at the 4 seasons where the Canucks missed the playoffs after making the playoffs. And this one, probably the most disappointing, in my opinion. More disappointing than the Torts-year. More disappointing than the second year of Willie Desjardins. More disappointing than the North Division season. Man, oh man, what's next for the Vancouver Canucks? I think what's next for the Vancouver Canucks is that they re-sign head coach Rick Tocchet and make him potentially the highest paid coach in the NHL. What? Rick Tocchet, again, he has a lot of people in this market who aren't believing in him and his system. But the way I see it, he has squeezed a lot of juice out of this team this season, despite some very trying circumstances. And of course, it has not been perfect. The Canucks have still, struggled with getting pucks on net. I think the Miller and Pettersson feud, Rick Tocchet has to wear some of that as well. That happened under his watch. But what we've seen recently and what we saw on Tuesday night against the Dallas Stars, that this team is willing to play their asses off and play for each other, never quitting in games. And we saw that with the craziest comeback in NHL history. But I think the number one reason why you should expect Rick Tocchet to stay in Vancouver and become one of the highest paid coaches in the NHL, if not the highest paid coach, is because of Captain Quinn Hughes. A player who, if it wasn't for his team missing the playoffs, if it weren't for the injuries, he likely would be in the Hart conversation or even a Hart Trophy candidate this season. But Quinn Hughes, we'll get into his comments because it is the big story with the Canucks right now. His comments with Ian McIntyre of Sportsnet. But listen to this about what he said about Rick and Adam Foote. And Adam Foote deserves some credit here too, because Quinn Hughes did go on the TNT broadcast a couple weeks ago and called Rick Tocchet and Adam Foote the best coaches that he's ever had. And with Quinn Hughes, again, Rick Tocchet and Adam Foote aren't going to go anywhere else and have a better defenseman on their team than Quinn Hughes, and potentially even a better leader than Quinn Hughes, a guy who is still relatively young, certainly getting towards the peak of his NHL powers. It's hard to be much better than Quinn Hughes is right now, but still coming to his own as a leader as well. And Quinn Hughes had this to say about Rick Tocchet and Adam Foote. He said, I believe that with Rick and Footy and the way that they coach and the structuring how we are defensively, if we add another player or two and have some guys within our group play better next year than they did the past season, I think we can be a really, really successful team. We're very structured. We don't give up much. We have maybe the best goalie tandem in the league, and we have a great D-corps along with others that are coming to help us. The point is, if we get Rick back and add a piece or two, we can be very successful. GM Quinn Hughes, baby, doing what he can to improve the Vancouver Canucks. And maybe Quinn Hughes is the shadow GM of this team, but it's hard to say that he's wrong on this one. I'm buying what Quinn Hughes is putting out there. Because again, the decor is there, especially with the additions they made recently. Now, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I did not love trading what looks to be an unprotected first for Marcus Pettersson. But that being said, the decor looks pretty damn good, especially with young guys and Elias Pettersson, Victor Mancini, and Tom Willander looking like they could be part of the equation for the long term, unless this management group decides to subtract one of those guys in order to boost the forward core. But the defense is pretty rock solid. Quinn Hughes mentioned that they could have the best goaltending tandem in the league. Look, the goaltending should be much better than it was last season. I mean, injuries aside, let's knock on some wood here. Let's say a little prayer for our boy Thatcher Demko. If Thatcher Demko does get back to close to full health, and look, we expect this guy to play more than 20 games next season for your Vancouver Canucks. Now that he's going to have the full offseason to train and get ready, Thatcher Demko is one of the best goaltenders in the NHL. I've been a Thatcher Demko believer in terms of his style, his mentality, ever since he was drafted in 2014. As long as this guy's body holds up, which I think it should with the full offseason of getting ready, he should be one of the best goaltenders in the NHL. And in this situation, then you're relying on Kevin Lankinen to be a solid 1B, not just a guy who's going to play 15 to 20 games like he did when he was backing up Jussi Saros, but be a guy who will play 30 to 35 games for this team, be well rested, and spot this team in some good situations. I think there is a lot of bounce back potential for the Vancouver Canucks next week, and it starts with the goaltending. And it certainly helps when you have structure in place with Rick Tocchet and Adam Foote, who have taught this team to play good defensive hockey. You know, right now I look at a team like the New York Rangers, and the New York Rangers are an absolute catastrophic defensive mess. I mean, this is a team that won the President's Trophy a season ago, but if you want to look at the flaws of the Rangers right now, they have one of the best goaltenders in the world, but they just hang him out to dry each and every night. The New York Rangers right now remind me of the Bruce Boudreau Canucks, who are kind of happy-go-lucky, run and gun, but they absolutely leave their goalie out to dry. That's not the case in Vancouver with Rick Tocchet and Adam Foote. They have taught this team how to defend that home plate area on the ice, they always call it. They've taught this team how to kill penalties. And again, I think they have the motivation up with this group where they've got them playing for each other. Listen to Quinn Hughes talk a bit more about Rick Tocchet. You can't tell me Rick Tocchet hears this and says, nah, I'm going to leave the Vancouver Canucks to go coach the Philadelphia Flyers. I don't buy that for a second. But one thing we will do later on in the show is look at teams who could have head coaching changes just to see, is there a more attractive situation for Rick Tocchet elsewhere? But before we do that, let's get to these comments from Quinn Hughes on Rick Tocchet. He goes on to say, Rick Tocchet, quote, "He's an amazing coach. You look at me individually in my game, he's been amazing for me and amazing for a lot of guys. He's just a great person, first of all. That's a guy you want to compete for, you want to play for, and he's a terrific coach. I think that just the way Rick coaches, how solid we are defensively and structured, he gives us a chance to win every night. At times with injuries this season, we might have been a little outmatched, but I think he's a terrific coach. Last year, he won the Jack Adams, and this year, I think he's probably been even better. But whatever he does, it's his decision. Obviously, I'd like to have him back, and I think he knows that." So look, the way it ends there with Quinn Hughes talking about Rick Tocchet, when he says, whatever he does is his decision, I think that gives Canuck fans a bit of worry there. Like, well, what do you mean it's his decision? Quinn, well, what do you know about Rick that we don't? But I'm telling you, this Canucks team, who just barely missed the playoffs this season despite having a ton of things go wrong. And don't get me wrong, it has been a disastrous season. But for a lot of reasons, there are reasons to believe that the Canucks will bounce back next season. And I believe the best way they do that is by retaining head coach Rick Tocchet. So I'm convinced Rick Tocchet is not going anywhere. And let's get to, on the other side, let's get to some of the other teams around the NHL who could be looking for new head coaches. Of course, It's the bottom of the barrel in the NHL, but is there a more attractive situation for Rick Tocchet heading into next season? Let's touch on that on the other side. You're listening to Locked On Canucks, your Canucks every day. We'll be back after shouting at our friends over at Bear Mattress.
Do you have trouble sleeping? If so, you're not alone. That used to be me, lacking rest, tossing and turning. I was late for meetings. I never felt like myself. That's until I found Bear Mattress. Bear Mattress and their sleep recovery technology helped me fall asleep faster, as well as enjoy deeper sleeps. I felt like myself again, and you can too. Bear Mattress knows that every sleeper is different. That's why they have their sleep quiz on their website that finds you your perfect match. As a side sleeper, I matched with the Elite Hybrid mattress, and I've been telling everyone in my life they have to try Bear Mattress risk-free. You can sleep on your Bear Mattress up to 120 nights, and if you're not getting the best sleep of your life, you can get it refunded. They'll pick it up with absolutely no hassle. So go to bearmattress.com and use my promo code LOCKEDONNHL at checkout to get 40% off site-wide. This offer is not available anywhere else. You have to use my promo code on the very last page of checkout to get this discount. That's bearmattress.com. Use my promo code LOCKEDONNHL for 40% off site-wide. Bearmattress.com, promo code LOCKEDONNHL.
We're back here on Locked On Canucks, your Canucks every damn day. And yeah, Rick Tocchet, I believe he's likely to stay with the Canucks next season, but let's shout out a comment because I'm going to change course here in the second segment based on some breaking news. Shout out to SK93 here for helping produce the show. He says, Beggsy, did you see what Boeser said? He's unlikely to resign in Vancouver. And yeah, I try to eat, breathe, and live hockey 24 hours a day, but I do got a day job and 2 young kids. And I did not see that until I was able to look it up over the break here. But Ian McIntyre just recently released an article that said that Brock Boeser is unlikely to return to the Canucks next season. And here are some of the quotes from the article. So let's go through it right now from courtesy of Ian McIntyre at Sportsnet. He was asked Brock Boeser about the season in general, and Brock Boeser said, "It hurts. We wanted to be in the playoffs again so bad. If you get in, you never know what can happen. We were playing some good hockey when we had everyone in the lineup, and then we ran into more injury problems. We had the distractions this year and injuries throughout the lineup all year. It's been a rough year, but there's no excuses. We didn't win hockey games like we were supposed to." And look, Brock Boeser, one thing I got to say to that is Brock Boeser, again, he had the chemistry with JT Miller. Obviously, he took a step back, but it has been a trying season for Brock Boeser because he got up to that pretty hot start in October. He gets laid out by Tanner Jeannot on a dirty hit, misses some time, and then he was just kind of slow coming back from that. And by the time he came back, that's when the distractions with JT Miller and Elias Pettersson really hit the apex there. But again, it's just been such an inconsistent season for Brock Boeser. And even after the JT Miller trade, you know, of course, Brock Boeser, you know, he had that chemistry with JT for so long. And after JT Miller was traded, Brock Boeser was a ghost. I mentioned it here on the show, but in 15 games following the JT Miller trade, Brock Boeser had 1 point at even strength. I mean, you want to talk about this team missing the playoffs. There's a ton of reasons for it. But one of the big ones to me is following that JT Miller trade, which was supposed to alleviate the room and make everything better. Brock Boeser and Elias Pettersson turned into ghosts for 15 games. Those were supposed to be the top 2 offensive players on this team. The guys that were supposed to lead the way. And they were invisible for most of February and a good chunk of March before finally heating up like, oh shit, we're about to miss the playoffs. We better turn it on. And again, that's a big reason why, to me, this team missed the playoffs. And look, here's what Brock Boeser said in terms of not returning to the Vancouver Canucks. So according to Ian McIntyre in this article, Boeser said, quote, "Honestly, it's unlikely at this point that he returns. It sucks. It's unfortunate. I'm just trying to play good hockey. Then I'll worry about everything after that. We all know it's been a roller coaster of a year, and there's been a lot of different things." And Boeser goes on to say, that he's refusing to talk to his agent right now until the end of the season. He says, I'm refusing to talk to Ben Hankinson right now. I feel like I'm playing a lot better hockey recently and I don't want to get distracted. That's one of the things I've learned. When there's distractions, I don't play my best hockey. The mental aspect of the game is so important. And this year, there have been a lot of distractions. So again, Brock Boeser, unlikely to return to the Canucks next season. And I think that's what we've been saying here on Locked On Canucks for quite some time. And I kind of power ranked it earlier this week on the episode with Patrick Johnson when we talked about what the hell happened to the Vancouver Canucks this season. But Brock, when we power ranked the free agents in terms of who's likely to return, I had it as Pius Suter, Derek Forbort, and Brock Boeser. And the writing's kind of been on the wall for some time now. The comments from Patrick Allvin and Jim Rutherford about Brock Boeser in terms of we're still evaluating the player and, just that constant rhetoric. It's like, what are you talking about? This is now the longest tenured Vancouver Canuck on the team. And yeah, I know you guys have only been here for 3.5 seasons, but what can you possibly gather from evaluating this player more? You're trying to see if that 40-goal season was a fluke or not? Well, I'll tell you what, 40 goals might have been a fluke, but Brock Boeser has been on pace for 30 goals per season throughout his NHL career. Of course, injuries and circumstances prevented him from getting to 30 goals until last year, but he has been about a 30-goal, 60-point player through his entire NHL career, which is now 8 seasons long, I believe. What more could you gather from evaluating Brock Boeser? It was a facade. We all knew it. Canuck fans are smart people. We're not idiots. You could see the writing on the wall that Brock Boeser wasn't going to return. Now, with that being said, and we said it after the trade deadline as well when Canucks management lied to their fans. Who knows what the exact return was for Brock Boeser at the trade deadline? What was being offered? I find it hard to believe that, when Allvin says, "Oh, you wouldn't believe the offers I got for Brock Boeser." You have to think it'd at least be something like the Brad Marchand deal, like a conditional second-round pick that could become a first. That seems kind of like the floor for a player like Brock Boeser. And based on the fact that this Canuck team was not going to win the Stanley Cup this season, this is starting to feel a little bit like Dan Hamhuis and Radim Vrbata from the trade deadline in 2016, where they should have sold those players. They didn't. Those players walked in free agency, and they didn't get anything for them. And look, when you're a team, whether you're in the mushy middle or you're down the bottom of the standings, you gotta sell your free agents and build for the future. I mean, there's the argument that you want to keep Quinn Hughes happy, you want to make the playoffs. And look, Brock Boeser, like you said, he's been better over the last month, but he said it himself. He's a guy that hasn't handled distractions well. And sometimes when the pressure's been turned up for whatever reason, Brock Boeser just hasn't been the same guy. And it's a complicated story arc with Brock Boeser too, because of course there's pressure in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and he was excellent in the playoffs last season. But often throughout his Canucks career, he has dipped at the wrong time. And look, I think this season, to me, one of the most telling things was following the JT Miller trade and up until the trade deadline, when the Canucks needed Brock Boeser to step up and be a play driver, be an offensive force. He turned into an absolute ghost. He wasn't just a borderline top 6 guy. He was one of the worst guys on this team for about a month of hockey there. Again, this is a guy who led the team in goals last season. It was really disappointing to see. And look, it's not a surprise, but I think management's got to wear this on their face right now. Let's not beat around the bush. They should have traded Brock Boeser at the deadline. We all know it. Pushing for the playoffs, there's an argument you got to keep Quinn Hughes happy, but you got to look towards the future. It can't just be about keeping one player happy. You got to look towards the future. This Canucks team was not winning the Stanley Cup this season. And man, oh man, we'll get into this maybe on another episode, but we've talked about it before on Locked On Canucks. Every day, as you guys know, are we seeing the end of the Boeser and Pettersson era in Vancouver? It's crazy enough that JT Miller got dealt, but this team conceivably could see Brock Boeser and Elias Pettersson go out the door this season, or this offseason, I should say. I'm not saying that's the worst thing for this team. I think, cap space is valuable. You can find players like Boeser, not say it's easy, but you can find players potentially with better speed, younger with scoring potential. And do you really want to commit to a guy who's 28, who's not the fastest guy in the world, who's had inconsistencies? I like Brock Boeser as a player, but with Brock Boeser on this team, again, the longest tenured Canuck, and again, this team has missed the playoffs in 8 of the last 10 seasons. Maybe 6 of the last 8 seasons if you look at the Vancouver Canucks. Brock Boeser unlikely to return to the Vancouver Canucks, according to Ian McIntyre. Interesting tidbit there. Shout out to SK93 for the pro tip, because I did not read that until the commercial break here on Locked On Canucks. Let's get some of your comments on the other side here on Locked On Canucks. I may quickly run through other teams in the NHL who need a head coach, because while Brock Boeser is unlikely to return, Rick Tocchet is very likely to return, because there's not that many attractive situations elsewhere in the NHL, in my opinion. What a nutty time in Vancouver. Speaking of which, let's talk about my nuts on the other side here on Locked On Canucks. There's nothing I love more than a mouthful of nuts, baby. And the best nuts for me are wonderful pistachios, because this is the snack that's both delicious and nutritious, baby. Crack into a good source of protein with wonderful pistachios. Wonderful pistachios are one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help you keep feeling fuller for longer. And you know me, I love the no shells variety, the naked nuts in my mouth, no tease, baby. It's the perfect grab-and-go snack for busy days. Whether I'm snacking at my desk, on the road, or just need a quick protein boost, they're always my go-to. And if you like cracking open that shell instead, the in-shell options are also a classic favorite. So get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right, we're back here on Locked On Canucks. Your Canucks every damn day. And man, oh man, changes are coming for the Canucks this offseason, and so they should be coming, because that's what happens when you have a season as disappointing as this one's been in Vancouver. And I think it's a big reason why Brock Boeser is likely to leave the Canucks. Let's get to some of your comments here, because I know you got opinions on Brock Boeser and those Vancouver Canucks. Greener in the comments saying, let Brock walk. I tend to agree, but, as Mike Laval saying in the comments here, I knew Boeser wasn't coming back. They should have traded him. Brock had all the leverage. And look, that leverage went up after the trade deadline. Because one of those situations where, Brock started scoring again. It's like, look, you guys need me. I can score these goals. I can come up in these big moments. Especially if the Canucks made the playoffs, Brock really would have had some leverage. And I do think that leverage has decreased now that they've been eliminated. But it's a situation where it's like, look, guys are out of the lineup. I'm scoring goals. You need me. Yeah, Brock Boeser. Again, I'm really curious to see what he does get in free agency, though. Because I think the AFP projection had around $8-ish million. I think he's, again, we all look at the annual cap, but Brock Boeser's looking at the long-term value. Like, can he get a deal paying him $56 million US? Can he get 7 years at $8 million per year? And look, if the contract's right, I mean, the Canucks apparently offered 5 years, somewhere in that, around the salary he's making right now, like the mid to high sixes. But again, that's Brock Boeser taking $35 million as opposed to $56 million. So again, these guys are making a lot of money. Does Brock Boeser feel the need or the desire to stay in Vancouver to the extent where he would take a discount? And is that even right for the Vancouver Canucks based on where they are? Look, I will still say it's all based on value. Like, if the Canucks could get Brock Boeser back on a 5-year deal, paying him $7 million a season, I think that's a good deal for the Canucks. And I think that you would consider keeping him if that was the case. But I don't think that's likely, because Brock Boeser, it's an opportunity where he's going to go out and he's likely going to get paid. Ryan Cecil in the comments asking, does the Boeser news change the Pius Suter situation at all? It affects it to the extent where if you re-sign Brock Boeser and Pius Suter, that's pretty much all the Canucks could do this offseason unless they traded someone off the roster. They're projected to have, let's call it $15 million in cap space. It's a little less than that. And they got to re-sign a few guys. If you get Brock Boeser 7, you get Pius Suter 4, then you pretty much have a few million bucks just to fill out your roster. By not re-signing Brock Boeser, the Canucks would have some flexibility to make a legitimate move this offseason. Now, what does that look like? We'll save that for another episode of Locked On Canucks. But I'll say, to answer Ryan's question about does the best news change the Suter situation at all, I wouldn't say it changes it drastically, but I'd say it slightly increases the odds of Pius Suter sticking around in Vancouver. Although I'm still not convinced that the Canucks are going to give Pius Suter $4.5 to $5 million a season. If they get him on a discount like they did last season with guys like Myers and Bluger and Joshua, where you, let's say, sign Suter at 4 as opposed to the 4.5 to maybe 4.75 you could get on the open market, then I think the Canucks look at it. But if he starts pushing around $5 million, I think the Canucks are walking away from Pius Suter. Now, quickly on Rick Tocchet before I get out of here. That's what I wanted to talk about in the second segment before I left. But you look around the NHL right now and potential coaching vacancies. And I'm looking at some of the teams who are out of playoff contention right now, right? And let's pinpoint a few of them here. The Utah Hockey Club with Andre Tourigny. I mean, that's one situation to me that might be attractive. It's ironic that Rick Tocchet coached that organization before. You got a young up-and-coming team there with good defense as well. But, that team's been taking steady steps forward. I'm not sure if they part with Andre Tourigny. And I'm not sure Rick Tocchet goes back to an organization that already let him go, even if you have completely new ownership and management there. Looking at the New York Rangers, they are likely, I think, to fire Peter Laviolette. I think he's the most likely coach to get fired, especially if you heard his comments after the loss to the Tampa Bay Lightning. But from rumblings that we heard here on Locked On Canucks, Rick Tocchet and JT Miller had some issues as well. And I think JT Miller wants to be pretty far removed from everything with the Vancouver Canucks this season. I don't see Rick Tocchet going to Broadway to be with the team that, quite frankly, is even in an even messier state than the Canucks. And again, I think the Rangers could definitely use a guy like Rick Tocchet. He seems like the kind of structured guy who is exactly what they're looking for. But again, with what happened with Miller here in Vancouver this season, I don't think Rick Tocchet would want to go to the New York Rangers. As we get down the list even further, the Anaheim Ducks with Greg Cronin, the Buffalo Sabres with Lindy Ruff, Mike Sullivan there in Pittsburgh. He's one of the highest paid coaches, such a beloved guy. I don't think what happened there is his issue. The Philadelphia Flyers, we've already talked about. Look, there's the Rick Tocchet connection, but the Flyers are projected to still be one of the worst teams in the NHL. I'm not sure about that. The Boston Bruins, would they move off of Joe Sacco, who was kind of a scapegoat this season? I'm not so sure about that, but Rick Tocchet would suit the Bruins. But the Bruins, are they even better off than the Canucks right now? Just because they have Pasternak and McAvoy? I don't think so. Again, you got Quinn freaking Hughes here in Vancouver and some good pieces on this team, despite the fact that they're going to miss the playoffs. And aside from those two teams, you have the three worst teams in the league: the Nashville Predators, Chicago Blackhawks, and San Jose Sharks. So the San Jose Sharks just hired Ryan Warshawski a year ago. He's not going anywhere. Chicago Blackhawks, you can see them looking for a new coach, but you're really going from the ground up with those teams. So look, if you want to look at the candidates, I think for Rick Tocchet, it's Utah, it's New York Rangers, maybe the Anaheim Ducks, maybe the Buffalo Sabres, the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Boston Bruins, the Nashville Predators, the Chicago Blackhawks. There could be a lot of coaching turnover this offseason. There could be a bidding war, let's say, for Rick Tocchet's services. But Rick Tocchet was also an NHL player. I don't think Rick Tocchet's hurting for cash. I think the best case for Rick Tocchet in terms of the situation, he's comfortable with his management team already. They've known him since his days in Pittsburgh. He's got Quinn Hughes as his freaking captain. Like you said, the defense, the goaltending is solid. This offense just needs to be middle of the pack. I think Rick Tocchet, the best situation for him is in Vancouver, and I'm pretty damn convinced he's coming back. Don't let anyone else tell you otherwise. Let's get a couple more comments here before we get to Locked On Canucks. Some different comments here in the comments. Oh, I love a good argument. Kay Cato says in the comments, Tocchet needs to leave. We're not winning games, taking 11 shots on goal all the time. And then Greener saying, Toc is not the issue. Look, the shots on goal have been a problem for the Vancouver Canucks, and there's give and take in the NHL. I mean, structures aren't that complicated, but often when you play well defensively, you sacrifice a bit of offense and vice versa. But going back to the structure of this team and a reason why, Brock Boeser is likely to leave, when you play as structured as the Canucks do, you're not taking as many chances, right? So unless you have an incredibly speedy team, it is hard to get up the ice and create as much offense. And obviously, guys have had down years here. There's a number of reasons for the offense sucking, and I think Rick Tocchet and his structure aren't near the top of that list. When your superstar turns into Philip Deneau, that's an issue. When one of your top wingers is one of the slowest guys in the ice in Brock Boeser, that's an issue. This Canucks team needs to get quicker on offense, and I think that can help mask some of the shooting issues from this season. Again, I don't think Rick Tocchet is the issue. Rick Tocchet is likely to stay in Vancouver. Brock Boeser reportedly is likely to leave Vancouver. Let us know how you feel in the comments. Interact with us wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. For now, I got to get out of here. Shout out to you and you and you. If you like what we're doing, go subscribe and like on YouTube. On the podcast side, go follow us and leave a 5-star review. For now, I got to get out of here. I'm Trevor Beggs, and you've been listening to Locked On Canucks.
Your Locked On Canucks, your daily podcast on the Vancouver Canucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.